Welcome to the vBrownbag APAC podcast. I'm Brett Johnson, or at BrettJohnson008 on Twitter. I'll be hosting tonight's presentation on Cisco ACI. Alistair Cook will be our co-host, and we'll be joined by Lauren Malhoit, who will be doing the presentation and going through Cisco ACI with VMM. So this is the second installment of the Cisco ACI product. For the latest on our vBrownbag news, podcasts, and giveaways, go to vbrownbag.com or professionalvmware.com. And when you're ready, Lauren, it's all yours.
All right, thanks so much, Brett. Great to be back with both you and Al here. This week I've presented the challenge by doing it all over hotel Wi-Fi, so we'll see. We'll see what obstacles we come to, but hopefully it all goes smoothly. Yeah, as you said, Brett, I'm talking about VMM integration, so basically virtualization and ACI. And VMM basically stands for Virtual Machine Manager, in case you're wondering about that. So let's go ahead and move forward. So I'm gonna, since we are vBrownbag and we have a lot of roots in virtualization, I'm gonna try to present this in like I'm presenting to a bunch of VMware admins, basically. So what are the problems that VMware admins are facing with the network? Well, you can deploy applications and deploy VMs very quickly when we're just talking about compute and storage. But the network is honestly what's been holding us up a little bit more. There's a lot more red tape. And it's not just that network admins are lazy, right? There's a lot of configurations that they have to make. ACLs are not a simple thing. Firewall rules are not a simple thing. And usually they require a lot of change management and all that stuff. So talk a little bit about why ACI will help all that. We actually we automate pretty much like 90% of your day-to-day network admin configurations. So let's get into more about the hypervisor integration. So we do have built-in integration with VMware, Microsoft Hyper-V, and KVM. And we call these VMM domains. So I'll show you guys that in the GUI when I go to do a demo. We call those VMM domains. We have physical domains too for things like bare metal servers. Just the terminology, really. It's not that important that you know everything about it. I'm going to concentrate mostly on VMware in this just because that's what I'm more familiar with, and I think that's what a lot of our audience looks forward to. And then at the end, if we have time, I'll talk a little bit about the Hyper-V integration. So, what is ACI? What are networks? And if you tuned in last week and kind of saw the whole what's an endpoint group and EPGs and things like that, we're talking about connecting groups of things to other groups of things. And these can be virtual. They can also be physical. But I show here, like a web EPG and an application EPG, and both contain VMs. And they're able to communicate over ports 80 and 443, or HTTP and HTTPS. In one direction in this case. We can set it up all different ways, but, just to kind of level set and remind you guys what we talked about last week. Remember endpoint groups, because we're going to get into that a little bit more here. There are two ways we can do virtual endpoint discovery, or basically VM discovery within ACI. So we can do control plane learning, either through an out-of-band or an in-band handshake. The out-of-band handshake uses the open vCenter APIs or vSphere APIs. The in-band handshake uses something we call OpFlex. OpFlex is an open protocol, so it's not just Cisco proprietary. We're working with a lot of vendors, a lot of companies on making this protocol, more and more popular, I guess. And it's a southbound protocol that basically allows us to manipulate devices at the other end of, at the other end of it, basically. So if I want to change configurations on southbound devices, I would use OpFlex to do that. The other way we can do virtual endpoint discovery is through data path learning, and this just uses the LLDP protocol. to find your VMs. So specifically, let's talk about VMware integration. And I'll show you guys this in the demo as well. But basically, we sign on to our APIC, and we create a VMM domain. This VMM domain has information like the name of the data center in vCenter. So, when you create vCenter constructs, you go through, and the first thing you do is create a data center, right? Give it a name, whatever you want to call it. So we connect to that. We also provide the VMware administrator credentials there. We specify, we go on to specify a name of here's where it gets complicated, not really, but the vSphere distributed switch or the distributed virtual switch, or even we have something called an application virtual switch too. So VDS, DVS, AVS, they're all kind of the same thing for our intents and purposes tonight. There are differences, but I'll probably get more into that next week, or our next session together. Probably not on Christmas, but but the next time we meet. So anyway, we actually create this vSwitch for, let's just say vSwitch to keep it simple, through the APIC, and that will show up in vCenter. Once we create that vSwitch, we can then assign hosts to it in vCenter, like we would if we were creating it all through the VMware, through the web UI. And you just follow the normal steps for that. And then you create EPGs on your APIC, on the Application Policy Infrastructure Controller, which again is our ACI controller. And these EPGs are actually the same thing as virtual port groups. So when I create an EPG and I assign it to a certain VMM domain, that creates a port group on the virtual switch that I created through the APIC. And then of course I can assign VMs to those port groups now in vCenter, just as I normally would when doing VM networking. And those VMs will then get the policy that I assign to the EPGs. So before I go on, there was a lot there, and again, I'll show you the demo, but do you guys have any questions on that?
Will the EPG port group just display just like a normal manually created port group in vCenter?
Yes, it will, and I'll show you guys that. Now there is an exception, which again I'll talk about more in our next podcast in the series, but I guess to give you a teaser, if you guys are really looking to go out and look some stuff up, we do have something now called VM attribute EPGs, which will not appear in vCenter. But those are kind of like dynamically created EPGs. And again, we will get into that. Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to clarify, a virtual distributed switch is required, not a standard switch for VMware, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So again, we have, the vSphere distributed switch slash a DVS, distributed virtual switch, we'll call those the same thing basically. And then through Cisco, we have something called an application virtual switch. And this is, if you've heard of the Nexus 1000V, it's almost the same thing as that, with maybe a few extra features to give it that ACI flair.
Excellent.
All right. Well, that brings us to our demo, I guess. So let me get out of here and get onto my APIC here. So this is our familiar APIC GUI. I'm already in my tenant, but just to kind of start where you usually start, again, here's our system dashboard with all of our health scores and all that good stuff. And then if I click on VM networking at the top, you can see over on the left in the inventory, I have Microsoft, OpenStack, and VMware in here. So like I said, we integrate with all of those solutions, a close integration through several different ways. And again, we'll kind of concentrate on VMware here. So I will expand this out just to show you what we can kind of do. Once we connect, once we create the VMM domain and connect our vCenter, we are able to pull all of these options, right? So I didn't configure any of this stuff. It was all gathered through the vSphere APIs. So as you can see, I can click on hypervisors here, and it shows me all of my hosts and what their IP addresses are, whether they're powered on, how many VMs they have. I can actually click on VMs and get IP information, MAC information, the state of the VM, which network adapter it's attached to, and so on. It should say port group too. That one may just not be attached to something. But anyway, it gives us all this information, right? It pulls it all and kind of allows us to do some better troubleshooting should we need to. So, you know, we have stats and we have faults over here. This VM's down, but let me see if I can. I probably should have looked for one that was up before we started. Here we go. If I click on stats, I can see various network information for that particular VM. I should even be able to see it for the hypervisor. Yep, so here's networking stats for the host itself. I can click on faults and see faults. There are no faults for this particular hypervisor. I can click on topology for various things. So we can go through hypervisors. We also have our DVS, our vSwitch here, which shows all the port groups. And again, I can click on those port groups, get various information. I'm still on a lab in the Netherlands, so it's you know, it's moving as fast as it should, basically. I can find, here you go. So if I click on a port group that's actually being used, I see which VMs are in that port group. Again, I get IP address information and all of that good stuff. I can click on faults, I can click on history. So I get a lot of information in there. And it's pretty, excuse me, it's pretty easy to create the vCenter domain. Basically, I come up with a virtual switch name. You know, I can call it whatever I want. Just know that it's going to be called that in vCenter as well. I can choose if I want to create a vSphere distributed switch or the Cisco AVS, as I mentioned. I can specify VLAN pools that I want to put in there. Here's where I would enter my vCenter information. We can also connect to vShield if you're using vShield. And then we can specify, you know, any sort of LACP information, firewall modes, et cetera, et cetera. You don't have to do all that. I'm gonna cancel because I can't connect to the same vCenter more than once, basically. I can create other DVSs, but we'll just keep going with this. And if I go to controllers, here I have options to create a vCenter credential. So that's where I would create my, you know, let's say administrator at vSphere.local as a familiar one for those of us that have configured SSO in vCenter. And then we can also create the vCenter vShield controller in here as we did up here. So just to kind of show you here, and I will build it out, but we see some port groups in here. For instance, gold, legacy, silver. If I click on tenants and click on the particular tenant where those are created, because again, the EPGs are a tenant configuration, I can see EPG gold, legacy, and silver. Now, Brett, you asked about what does it look like in VMware. Well, here it is. I have gold, legacy, and silver port groups here. So basically, I will create one so you guys can see how that works. Let me get into my own tenant here. And if you'll recall, we created this vBrownbag application network profile last week. And I do have a couple application EPGs, which are App EPG and Web EPG. You can also see it over here in the little picture. Now to put these EPGs into my distributed virtual switch, all I need to do is associate it with the VMM domain. So I'm pulling VMware down. I'm attaching it to an endpoint group. It comes up with my little configuration wizard here. I'll click the plus sign. I'll click that VCDVS, which was already configured, and hit update. And that should be all I have to do. Click submit. And let's go back into our vCenter here. And as you can see, VBB tenant, VBB-AMP, and it's the web EPG. And now I've created a port group that I can use and assign VMs as I normally would assign VMs within vCenter. So, and I'm not using the web UI right now. For some reason, it wouldn't let me get into the web UI, so I'm using the FAT client here, which probably no one's disappointed about anyway. But it's as simple as that. You know, the VMware integration is really easy. Just to kind of show you, the Microsoft stuff looks really similar. We have different terminology, basically. I mean, the APAC terminology is the same, but the Microsoft terminology is different. But there's it's most of the same features are available in both. So let's go back to my demo, or my PowerPoint, my trusty PowerPoint. And okay, so we also have something called the ACI plugin for vCenter. What this is basically a third-party plugin that you would install in your vCenter, and like any other third-party plugin, basically. So you would use it through the web UI. It's not, you can't use it through the FAT client, like pretty much anything new these days. But this allows VMware admins to create things like tenants, or you know, I don't think they can create tenants, but they can manage the tenants. They can create endpoint groups. They can apply policy to both virtual and physical endpoint groups. So they'll be able to see EPGs that are within the APAC, basically. And once they've created their virtual endpoint groups, they can apply policy saying, you know, allow ICMP or allow HTTP to this physical port or to this physical endpoint group over here. So that's kind of cool. It gives you kind of, you know, one place to do it all. And of course, we put in health scores, which a lot of VMware admins will be familiar with if you're using things like VCOps or I guess it's vRealize operations now. And I will show you guys a demo of that. Unfortunately, I just have a video, but it should still get the point across. And one sec, that's like a black screen. Let me ACI plugin and pause. All right, can you guys see that all right?
Yep, that's coming through fine.
Okay, great. So as you can see, I'm in my vSphere web client, and over to the right here, I have my Cisco ACI plugin, and then it's also over on the left, which I think I actually show in the video. So we'll go ahead and click on that, the Cisco ACI Fabric, and this takes me into the ACI plugin for vCenter. And on the left there, I have all my different options. The ACI Fabric lets me see all of the controllers or the APICs that are there. I only have one there, which is a no-no, but since it's a lab, it's okay. Generally, we'd have 3 or 5, as we discussed before. Tells me if it's healthy, tells me what version of software we're running, all that good information. We have network information. This is where you'll find your tenant EPG information. Security is where we'll actually find what we would call contracts in ACI, so that policy essentially. We can actually put in layer 4 through 7 devices here. So let me run through it. You can see this health scores there that I talked about. These are all the tenants that were created in my APIC. We have health scores, we have faults to the right, so we can see all of that information. And you can see everything that you can do within the ACI plugin here. So I've clicked on network now. I'm in my only fabric that I have. I've selected a tenant, which we're calling VCP in this case. That mouse is like all over. All right, so I'm creating a security zone here, which is basically what we would call the contracts in the APIC. I'm calling it web to app, so you know, my source is going to be web, my destination is going to be app, and we're referring to endpoint groups in that case. So you can see I have ACI port groups selected there, and we're trying to stick with the terminology that a VMware admin might use in this case. So I'll kind of do both, but ACI port groups are endpoint groups, which are also the same as virtual port groups in this case. So we'll expand that out, and you can see I have my two EPGs, web and app. I put web in my source, app, EPG in my destination. And then I've selected the service groups button. Service groups are going to be protocols, basically, or maybe groups of protocols if we've built that out. So we'll go ahead and put ICMP here. So now ping is allowed from web to app. And then I click submit, and it's all good. Next, we'll show adding a layer 4 through 7 device. So again, these are going to be like firewalls or load balancers. Right now, that's all that is. That's all we can do with the ACI plugin. There'll be more later, but you know, you got to start somewhere, right? So we're going to add a load balancer in this case, and I'll select load balancer eventually, and then you click on select device. And all of these devices, so you can't actually configure your firewalls and load balancers from the ACI plugin. You're going to do that in the APIC. So the ACI plugin can really, it can consume these services, but it can't create them. But as you can see, I have a Citrix NetScaler out there. So notice it's not even a Cisco branded piece of equipment or anything. It's most likely a virtual NetScaler. It doesn't have to be. We can and I think I talked about this a little bit, but we can have physical or virtual firewalls and load balancers from, you know, a slew of other companies, including Cisco. You know, we can provide the ASA firewall and all that. But yeah, so you would just insert this, and that's all you really need to do. So there is also some troubleshooting stuff that we have in the ACI plugin that's pretty cool. We can select from multiple things. We can do a virtual machine, we can do a port group, an external network, which might be like a layer 3 endpoint group. It's layer 3 right now, we can't do layer 2. So I'll go ahead and select tenant common, we'll do an external network. So anything from my 20.20.20 /24 subnet to my Web1 VM. That's, I want to check connectivity on that, is what I'm doing here. And it looks like connectivity works. I'm allowing UDP 50, and that gives you all that information. So, you know, we can check connectivity. It'll list all of the services in between, whether there's a load balancer, whether there's a firewall, any contracts that are configured, or filters. So that's a pretty nifty troubleshooting tool. It reminds me of, I don't know if people remember in the Cisco ASAs, if you're a firewall person, they have a tool called Packet Tracer, which is not to be confused with the Packet Tracer tool that you use in like Cisco labs where you can build out what's the word, simulated CCNA labs or CCNP labs. So it is a different tool, but they had a packet tracer in the ASA, and you could put a source and destination in, and put what kind of packet you wanted to send, which protocol, and it would check the connectivity for you just like this. So I included that just because I thought it was a pretty nifty tool.
So with the troubleshooting and contracts, if what happens is there's a conflict, like for example, you have a port blocked in one contract and another port is allowed for the under a different service rule.
So basically, if you have, it'll deny it because it's always going to go to this most secure. What's the word I'm looking for? The most secure rule. So if there is a conflict, it'll deny it.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, because there's not actually, like in traditional networking, there's not, what is the word that I'm looking for right now? There's no ranking. That's not the word, but you guys know what I mean. So there's a certain right, exactly.
Wins.
Yes. So that doesn't actually exist in ACI. Okay, from current slide. So we did that. We also integrate with vRealize automation if you guys are using something along those lines. So, the terminology in this is blueprints. You create blueprints to automate and orchestrate things. This used to be called vCenter Automation Center, or vCloud Automation Center, sorry. So we do have an integration with this. You can do it, either as the full-blown admin or tenant admin, do things like creating EPGs, providing policy in general. Pretty much a lot of the configuration that you would find yourself doing on more of the day-to-day basis rather than initial setup, you can do as a tenant admin. And then there's some initial setup stuff that you can do as the full-blown admin. And then to go through the Microsoft stuff real quick, there are two ways we interact with Microsoft. The first is just straight innovation with the System Center Virtual Machine Manager, SC-VMM. So that's kind of like the vCenter for Hyper-V. They probably don't like that I would say it that way, but makes it easier. This is a manual integration basically, but once you get it set up, you can do all the things that you can do like I showed you with the VMs. It'll pull all that information automatically using OpFlex in this case, that southbound open protocol that I talked about. We also have a way to do it with the Windows Azure Pack, which is the actual installation is a lot more automated. And what Azure Pack gives you is basically you can manage everything from the Windows Azure Pack. So you can create your Hyper-V VMs in there, but you can also create EPGs, policies, contracts, firewalls is what they call it, which are our contracts. So everything, you would do pretty much everything from the Azure Pack rather than signing into the APAC. And, that's just kind of up to the admins how they want to do it. It's not so different than vRealize Automation Suite, but Azure Pack is a free download as well. But it just kind of depends on how you want to manage things inside your company, right? What your preferences are. I had someone ask me today, what is the, what do you guys prefer, Hyper-V or VMware? And, that is not an ACI decision to make. That is, your company's religious decision to make between the two virtual vendors, right? Because we're going to integrate with both, and we're going to do it in pretty much the same way. Technology is a little different, of course, but the features are there for pretty much both sides of the coin. And then here's just a little bit more about using it with the Windows Azure Pack. There are some requirements. Server 2012. I'm sure Server 2016 will be supported once it eventually comes out, maybe in 2017. System Center 2012 R2, and then of course the Windows Azure Pack, which I mentioned was free to download. And with that, I think that's all I had for tonight. A little early, I guess, but I don't know. Do you guys have any questions that we could perhaps go over, or anything you want to see?
I think I'm pretty good at the moment. How about you, Alistair?
I think that was really good. Good to see integration and all of the kind of touch points. Good.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll dive in a little more next time. Like I said, I thought about kind of doing it all tonight, but then I thought that might be a lot too. So.
Yeah, and we appreciate it. It's really this morning for you rather than night. It's pretty early in the morning in Indy for you, and it's really good of you to be up and about for us for this, and seeming pretty alert, I have to say.
Well, I have to admit I'm actually in California this week, so it's only 12:30 here right now.
Not quite so bad, and yeah, you're not disturbing your partner as well as you go through this.
That's right. I'm just disturbing all of my hotel neighbors.
Yeah, we can be disturbed by something.
Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate the opportunity once again. And yeah, if you come up with any questions for me, reach out to me at Malhoit, MALHOIT on Twitter. And I'm lmalhoit at cisco.com if you want to email me. And yeah, that's about it.
Thank you very much, Lauren.
Thank you, guys.
Excellent. And we'll be back in the middle of January after a wonderful Christmas and New Year break. So, Brett, do you want to bring it home?
Yep. All right. Thank you guys for watching our vBrownbag APAC podcast. And yeah, as I mentioned at the start, if you want to get more information on vBrownbag, vBrownbag.com or VMware, so professionalvmware.com is the other site as well. Thank you once again for joining us.
Great job on your first show, Brett.
Thank you.
Nicely done.